Can you hear me there in the back? Yes, awesome. Well, it is a thrill and a privilege to be here at Agile Prague. So before I introduce myself and jump into my presentation, I just want to say a couple of things. First of all, I want to thank Zuzi, who extended such a kind invitation for me to come and speak to you today. You may not know this, or some of you already know this, but the others who don't, it was actually Zuzi's birthday on Saturday. So, how about you all join me? I can't sing happy birthday in Czech. I looked it up on YouTube. There's no way it's happening. But perhaps the rest of you who know happy birthday in English can join me and sing Zuzi a happy birthday. So, 1, 2, 3. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Zuzi. Happy birthday to you. All right. Thank you, Zuzi, and thank you, Paul, for all the hard work that you do to put Agile Prague together. We really appreciate it. And it's a lovely turnout today. So let's jump into it. Flip the script and manage fear during an Agile transformation. That's my topic today. But who am I? That's a great question. Actually, hold on. Where did my intro slide go? Interesting. We jumped right over it. There we go. Let me introduce myself very quickly. My name is Dave Ross. I'm the Chief Agile Evangelist at Miro. It's a super weird title. What does an evangelist do? I get that question all the time. Has nothing to do with religion. I am not here to convert you to anything. Perhaps a deeper love and appreciation of Miro. That's the only thing I want to convert you to. But what my role is basically coming to wonderful events like this one and hearing from you, the Agile community, because the Agile community is one of our core constituencies. They're one of our biggest, if not the biggest, user group that Miro has. And so we love and appreciate you all as users and as customers of Miro, and we care very deeply about what's going on in this community. And so really, I was hired to engage with you all and also report back to Miro about the cares and concerns, the trends, the things that are going on in the Agile world these days. And what qualifies me to do this is I actually have been in the Agile space for, it's 2 decades, it's so long. Oh my God, time flies. I started out actually as a project manager a million years ago at a small startup in Austin. And we went through an Agile transformation. And after the Agile transformation consultants had left, I was handed the keys and said, congratulations, you're now a Scrum Master, and you're going to be responsible for the continuous improvement efforts here going forward. So it was a lot of fun. Actually, those, of course, in the early days of Agile, we remember the promise, of what agility was bringing. We were doing waterfall, and we were missing deadlines. Everything was horrible. We had these big, thick product requirement documents that we used instead of like smaller increments of work. And it was a fun time, a real fun time, because we got to learn a lot and make a lot of mistakes. But since then, I've worked at other companies such as Experian, Expedia Group, and I was at GitHub for a couple of years before I came to Miro. And now I'm an advocate for you, for the Agilist community at Miro today. All of my slides are now out of sequence. This will not stand. Hold on one moment while I fix that very quickly. Never fails that there's a tech problem right from the get-go. All right. So our agenda for today, what we're going to talk about is I'm going to frame the problem. So when I talk about an Agile transformation, we recently did a survey at Miro, which isn't publicly available yet, but is coming out at the end of the month, where we kind of took the pulse of the Agile community, and we wanted to get some feedback and understand what was going on. So I'll talk a little bit about that. I'm going to also frame the problem of why agile transformations cause fear using a couple of models, a change management model and a changing human systems model. And then I'm going to try and give you 4 strategies that have worked for me on how to manage that fear during the agile transformation. And then as I look at my clock, I've got 40 minutes. If there's time at the end, I'll take a few questions as well. Sound like a plan? We ready to go? All right. So I'm going to make you all work first before I start talking. Get out your phone and scan that QR code. And can you answer that question for me? What is your experience with agile transformations where you work? And this is a huge group, so I'm going to apologize right now. If you don't get the screen coming up on your phone, it's because either the internet is not great, or your cell connection is not great, or it's just too many people hitting this particular server at the same time. But if you can get through, answer this question for me and tell me, do you feel people and interactions are prioritized over tools and processes? I'm curious. What do you think? In your experience, what can you tell me? And I'll give us about 45 seconds or so on the timer, now 30 seconds, for you to answer that question. Is it working for everybody? I can see some heads shaking. No? Okay. We'll do our best. We'll do our best. If you can get through, please just answer that question. And if you get an error message, I apologize as well. Okay? Let's move on. Got a few more seconds. There we go. We've got lots of answers here. Okay. Okay, perfect. So lots of great information here. How can we easily summarize this? Let me get that done. So what I'm going to do here quickly is I'm using the Miro AI to tell us, based on the selected objects, let's generate a quick summary. And what I'm doing here is I'm asking the AI in Miro to review all of your sticky notes, all the feedback we just got, and provide a summary in American English. And since we're in Prague, I thought we'd do it in Czech too, just for fun. So, what is it telling us? So the summary here is many participants believe that people and interactions are prioritized over tools and processes. That's good news. Although some feel that tools and processes still take precedence in many organizations. And there is a sentiment that while the intent to prioritize people exists, it is not always effectively implemented. Sounds about right to me. So the majority opinion is saying that people and interactions are prioritized over tools and processes, but there are significant challenges and inconsistencies in practice. Okay, so great feedback. Thank you for that. Let me ask the Czech speakers in the room. Does the Czech, it looks good? Okay, cool. So the AI can also speak Czech. I'm glad to share that. So interesting that you say that the intent is there and that a lot of people or a lot of organizations are trying to prioritize people and interactions over tools and processes. Because of course that's our first value from the Agile Manifesto. And so Miro went and asked this exact same question to a broad community, broad international community of about 750 Agile practitioners and 500 Agile leaders across UK and Ireland, across Europe, US, Canada, Japan, and Australia. And we wanted to hear from them about what their experience was. Spoiler alert, because again, the survey hasn't been published yet, but 69% said that processes and tools overshadow individuals and interactions in their organization. As the Brits would say, that is gobsmacking, that particular statistic. And even more alarming to me is this, including nearly 1 in 4 practitioners, 23% said that individuals and interactions are rarely considered. You know, that makes me cry. Because that means we have failed as Agilists If this in 2024, if this is how people perceive agility, man, we're in real trouble. And you're an exceptional group because actually in the EU, you're some of the most pessimistic. If you look at the regional differences here, 78, not 69, 78% of people in the EU said that people and interactions are not prioritized. You need to be more Australian here in the EU, y'all. Like, come on. Australia was just 57%. So what are the possible solutions that, again, from that same survey that we did, we got some feedback from the Agile practitioners who said, if you could change how Agile is run in your organization, what would you do? And the top 3 items that they said were, give us flexible frameworks. So apologies to the Scrum adherents in the room, but an immutable framework is not what they want. They want to simplify their process, and they also want more agency, meaning more control, more self-organization. Those were the top 3 solutions that they were looking for. So bottom line is, we have to do better. Agile practitioners want these flexible and simple ways of working and more agency about decisions that affect them and their teams. So how can we do that? So first of all, before I answer that question then, if you want a full copy of this Agile survey that's coming out at the end of the month, you can add your name and register using this QR code. So I'll give you a couple of minutes to do that. And as you're doing that, the genesis of this whole talk, by the way, it comes from a conversation that I had with the Agile Transformation team at Tesco. Tesco is, of course, the huge retailer in the UK. And that Agile Transformation team was undertaking a huge new transformation effort for the parent company. They had done an Agile transformation at Tesco Mobile that had been very successful, but they were coming to Tesco, the parent company, and they were very concerned because Tesco, as a parent company, is humongous and has been around for over 100 years. And there are people who have worked there for 10, 20, 30 years and are very entrenched in their ways of working. And they had a lot of care and concern about how do we minimize the impacts to these colleagues of ours at Tesco so that they are not fearful. They're not afraid of the change that has to happen. So that's really the genesis of this particular talk. So we need to think about then how we're applying Agile transformations in the context of systems thinking. Again, as Agilists, we should all, or most of us should be familiar with what systems thinking is. I like this particular model. It resonates with me. It's by Quinn and Sonnenschein from 2007. So it's a little bit of an older model, and I think it's been probably modified since then. But typically, most transformations, or a lot of transformations that I've been a part of, have really focused on the power coercive forcing strategy. Leadership gets in a room with a bunch of paid external consultants, they make some decisions, and they impose, using their power of leadership, a new system on their organization. Not a recipe for success, unfortunately. That seems to be the overriding approach, just because command and control, as we all know, is so entrenched in management. Taylorism is with us. It walks among us. It has been with us for 100 years. And so it's a very, very hard thing to unlearn, and therefore that's why it's so pervasive. However, if you look at this model, you see that there are other strategies for changing human systems. And the one that I'm going to talk about today is actually using what's called the normative re-educative strategy, which if you read down here, it has an emphasis on relationships and open dialogue. That sounds more agile to me, rather than coming in and imposing a system on people. There's also elements of self-transcendence, which I'm not going to talk about too much, but Those other strategies, I would argue, are ones that have much more impact and much more permanence when you try to take on an agile transformation. All right, so that was the Quinn model. I'm also going to talk a little bit about this change management model. And by the way, there are lots of change management models out there. I don't pretend that this is the only one, but this is the Lippitt-Noster model. And it actually talks about the 6 different elements that you need for change to be successful. And so vision, consensus, skills, incentives, resources, and action plan. Those are the 6 that they call for. And there are others. Again, this is an older model, but so there are other things such as mindset that you could potentially add to this model. But I like it, and it resonates with me mostly because it really supports my thesis of fear-based behaviors in human beings. Those are the ones that cause the most problems with agile transformations. So if you see what it says, if you don't have a vision, if you don't provide an overarching vision to people who are subject to the change, you're going to create confusion. If you don't build consensus, you get sabotage, right? Consensus is hard to build. Here in the EU, you have a European Parliament that operates on a consensus basis. How easy do things come out of the European Parliament here, right? It takes a long time to get so many countries, so many perspectives, so many ideas, all aligned around a single consensus. If you miss skills, you get anxiety. Incentives, you get resistance. Resources, you get frustration. And if you miss an action plan, you get false starts. These are all fear-based behaviors, okay? Fear-based behaviors. So, again, this is another thing that is pointing us in the direction of fear-based reactions must be accounted for when undertaking an agile transformation. And that's basically what I'm saying here. So an agile transformation brings change, and that change in and of itself brings fear. The entrenched ways of working are known and safe. The people at Tesco have been doing things the same way for decades, right? They know nothing else, and they're very comfortable. And now we're moving their cheese, so to speak. So that fear of change is going to happen, and that is an innate human reaction. So it shouldn't be dismissed. It shouldn't be thought of or minimized in any way. It is very real. And it is probably the number one thing that is going to affect the quality and the impact of your agile transformation. So this is why we have to manage natural fears as part of it. As agilists, that's our challenge. So I'm going to give you 4 different strategies, some tactical or practical strategies on how to manage that fear. And the very first one is communicate, 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 communicate. So if we go back to that, the Lippitt model where we talked about providing a vision, that's part of this. You need to be able to make clear to everyone, understand what is coming, and acknowledge it and say, we understand that what we're asking you to do today is very hard, and it is going to cause disruption and chaos, and that's okay. So you have to actually give permission for people to feel chaos in their work. The really brave leaders out there in the agile transformations that I've seen are ones who say, okay, your performance review for the next year is going to change. I'm no longer going to base your performance review on productivity, because I recognize that when we go through the forming, storming stages of Tuckman, or if we go through the orientation, trust building, and goal clarification stages of the Drexler-Sibbitt model, that productivity is going to drop. And I'm not going to penalize you for that, because it's going to happen. We all recognize it's going to happen. And we want you to feel supported during this time. Okay? So communicate that change, communicate the vision of what's going to happen, use one of these models. Tuckman, of course, is the most popular one. because it's very simple and it's very straightforward, and most people can relate to that. But make sure people understand that the work that we're asking them to do is recognized, and it's going to be disruptive by its very nature. A second strategy, and a second tactical consideration here, is to really, truly embrace self-organization. Don't pay it lip service. We talk a lot in the Agile community about self-organizing teams, right? But more often than not, what we find is that teams are not self-organizing, particularly when it comes to things like organizational design. A lot of times, I've worked in transformations where it's an engineering manager getting together with leadership. They all sit together in a smoky room, and they make some decisions about how the teams are going to be realigned into Scrum teams or realigned into Kanban teams, and how they're all going to work together. And people are chess pieces on a big board, and they're just moving them around. Okay? That rarely, in my experience, is a recipe for success. Instead, what you have to do is you have to give people and teams control over how they are organized. But, and this is the important point here, we ask you to be self-organized, but it has to be informed self-organization, right? You want to give people the information that they need to make an informed and resonant choice on the teams. So the anecdote that I can give here is, I was working on Agile Transformation efforts when I was at Expedia, and I came in to one team, oversized team. It was about, I think, 14, 15 people were on it, and they were really struggling, really struggling. They had a problem with all of their meetings, their team meetings. The very first week that I kind of sat in on their daily stand-up, for example, it lasted an hour and 20 minutes. That's not a stand-up. Unfortunately. So they were very, very frustrated with that whole process, and they got really angry about it. And so after spending some time with them and understanding and observing just how they were working, it became apparent to me that there were actually two work streams or two value streams within that team. There was a group of software developers who were developing a software application that supported the other work stream, which was a group of data scientists who were working to develop machine learning models that were going to be deployed on that application. And so I said, well, it's great. You have to work together. You have to understand the work that each other does. But you don't need to sit in each other's, meetings. You don't need to do that. So how about we organize into these two separate streams? And then this team was split between an office in Seattle and an office in Austin. And I said, co-location, it's a great thing if you can make it work. It doesn't always work, and this is, of course, pre-COVID. So, those are the days that I'm talking about. If we can have the people working on this work stream all be co-located, there's benefits to doing it that way. And again, I gave them all of this information, and I also gave them the information in terms of skill sets that we might need on these two teams. And I sort of presented three options to them and said, you choose. What team do you want to be on? Where would you like to work? And actually, it came out to be that the ideal that the engineering manager and I had talked about in the background actually is how the team self-selected where they were going to work. So trust your team. Trust your team to make those decisions and give them the information that they need to self-organize. There's also forms you don't have to have, if you don't want to follow the model or think it's not appropriate to follow the model of long-lasting teams, dynamic reteaming is also an option. Let people make those choices in the moment. Where am I going to work? Who am I going to work with? What are we going to work to get done? And there's a lot of emerging work happening these days in emerging patterns like FAST, the fluid agile scaling. They do exactly that. That's a form of dynamic reteaming. That's actually a core central part of that particular framework. And if you think about it, pair programming, ensemble programming, also a form of dynamic reteaming at a sort of a micro level. So embrace informed self-organization. Don't be afraid of it. Your teams might actually surprise you in coming up with organizational designs that work best for them, but make it informed. I think this is my third one. My third strategy for minimizing fear is to give people more control and input and agency. Going back to that, the survey results that I talked about earlier. People want more agency. They want fewer mandates imposed upon them. So let them make decisions in their ways of working. And there are tons of ways to achieve that, right? Democracy, voting, that's probably the number one. Open space technology, giving everyone a forum to speak and to make decisions and to contribute and have their voices heard. Liberating structures. So all the facilitators in the room, of course, you're very familiar with liberating structures. If you're not, Google liberating structures and it'll take you to the landing page. There are a bunch of different constructs that maximize participation and maximize getting that feedback that everybody needs to do. And then that sort of participatory decision-making is especially key if you're going for some form of a scaled agile transformation. So I know that might be a dirty word to some in the room, but I'm sorry, I apologize. But if you're doing something like SAFe or less or something else, usually there's some form of, for lack of a better term, a steering committee that manages that agile transformation as it's running. In the SAFe framework, they call it the LACE, Lean Agile Center of Excellence. Make sure that it's not just a committee of leadership. Leadership needs to be there, yes, because they're the ones who write checks and can make things happen and to clear out impediments. But you need representation from teams as well to make sure that they have a voice and can help make decisions that are relevant to them. And then last but not least, and this of course is super key, leadership has to practice and model openness and transparency too. Easier said than done in a lot of organizations, I know. Much, much easier said than done. But you have to coach upwardly. If the Agile coaches in the room, you know this. If you don't coach upwardly and management and leadership doesn't change, then all the work that you do at the team level is for naught. Because old patterns will be reimposed again. Our old friend, the old boogeyman Taylorism will come back. Last one. So the last, and this is actually a favorite one of mine, because the team actually that I worked with at Expedia Group, we were an experimentation team. We did A/B testing as part of our work. And so it was very natural for us to position everything as an experiment, and we're here to learn. Nothing is permanent. We're going to keep changing and iterating on everything. You need to take that same mindset of experimentation into an agile transformation, because everything is experimental. You have to position ways of working and changes to them as experiments. And key to this is to give it sufficient time to run, right? You don't just do it for one iteration and say, did we like it? Are we going to keep it? Yes, no. Okay, we're going to throw it away and go back to the old way we're doing it. Let it run for a sufficient amount of time. Let it run for 2, 3 iterations. Get feedback on that change from the team at every step. What did you like about it? What did you not like about it? What do we keep? What do we discard? So that's the important part of any transformational change, is making sure that you take an experimentation mindset, keep what works, and then change or discard what doesn't. Okay. I am way ahead of time, so we're going to have some time for questions at the end of this, which is great. So we can, should, and must do better. This is my call to action for the Agilists in the room. We have to acknowledge that fear-based behaviors will resist change of any sort that you try to bring into the organization. It has to be recognized and acknowledged. And you have to engage with those subject to the change. This is not a top-down imposition of a new way of working. This is we are going to work together, top-down, bottom-up, and work it out. Use these human-centered strategies that I've given you to make effective and long-lasting change. And that's the only way that we're going to move that needle on that number that I showed you of 69% of people feeling like people and interactions are deprioritized in their environment. All right. Thank you, everybody. I really appreciate this time with you. I have about maybe 10 minutes for additional questions if you have any.